Narcissistic abuse is theft. It steals so much from us. It steals hope. It steals identity. It steals aspirations. It steals joy. It steals safety. It steals happiness. And in some ways, it steals our empathy. Why do people stay so long in narcissistic relationships, right? If they're so terrible, why do people stay so long? Because the good days can actually be good. In some cases, really good. Or even sometimes just good enough, but they can be good. And if you have good days, and you may also have a lot invested in the relationship, marriage, children, shared home, family ties, culture, whatever it is, you may want to keep that going. And this is what is so unique about narcissistic relationships, and why when people say, well, if it's so bad, why didn't you leave? They are not getting it. Because in many ways, it's a satisfying and confusing roller coaster. If I can get through the bad days, there just may be a good day coming. The moving goalposts. After this happens, or that happens, or after we get through this, or after we get through that, then everything's going to be fine, or everything may be better. And then throw in there the trauma-bonded justifications during the bad days. Oh, they don't mean it. We had such a good weekend. You know what? Maybe it's my fault. And you're facing lots of confusion. It's not as simple as I am gaslighted 24/7 all the time and nothing good ever happens in this relationship. Now, over time, the ratios may get worse, and you may get closer and closer to the relationship being terrible 100% of the time, but in general, those aren't the numbers. So this is a simple issue. If something in your life, if something in any of our lives is good, what do most of us do? We keep doing whatever results in that good outcome. For example, we like how it feels to be praised at work, so we keep doing the thing that gets us praised. When we were children, we saw that if we were compliant or got good grades or were helpful around the house, then our parents may have noticed us, so we kept doing that. In a relationship, when we are what they want us to be, we may try to keep doing that, right? Now, there was a Twilight Zone. I was thinking about this video. There was a Twilight Zone episode I saw when I was a kid. And I think they even remade it in a modern Twilight Zone. It scared me to death. I couldn't get it out of my mind. Little did I know that it probably kind of set the tone for some of my early interest in narcissism and narcissistic relationships. Basically, in the storyline, there was a family. And one of the daughters had this weird power that if anyone disappointed her or pissed her off, that they would lose their mouth and never be able to speak again. I got to tell you, I was way too young to be watching this. But if you pissed her off, she would take away your mouth. They would be rendered silent. No mouth, like no mouth. So the family totally walked on eggshells more and more and more. They did anything she wanted. They watched the same silly TV show over and over again. They ate ice cream for dinner. Anything to avoid her wrath. Because if they got on the wrong side of her, they'd lose their mouth and their ability to talk. Even the smallest thing could potentially bring a family member into her crosshairs. And when a new person would come into the family system, like a visitor or an extended family member, the family would try to warn the person, but people couldn't believe it was that bad and would say something, and bam, no mouth. It was such a phenomenal metaphor for what happens in narcissistic relationships. We may not lose our mouth, but we do lose our voice. We become afraid to speak our feelings or our truth or our needs for fear of being silenced or shamed. So people in narcissistic relationships try to keep the good days going. And how do you do that? By playing the game the way the narcissistic person wants. Praising them, wanting what they want, going where they want, doing things the way they want, never expressing your needs because they don't like that, not expressing your opinions because they don't care, not sharing your interests because they could give a damn, not sharing your aspirations, just only validating them, having none of your own needs, going along, and you may, if you do that, may pull some more good days out of the relationship, right? You take away their resentment, you take away their contempt, their being put upon, their frustration. Maybe you could ride out those good days a little longer. People in narcissistic relationships sadly and tragically figure this out through a process of discovery. In the beginning, many people in these relationships do make their needs known because that's a normal thing to do. But then people slowly realize, that when I tell them I need something, they get mad. But when I don't do this, things go well. And the days it goes well feel so good. So it's like, oh, whatever. I don't need to see my friends that often. Or who cares if they don't want to see the movie I want to see? Or, even though they don't want to do what matters to me, maybe expressing all these needs is needy. I need to stop doing that in this relationship, right? Relationships are all about compromise, after all. I can do this. And you hold back on those needs and things get better. We all become like that Twilight Zone family, keeping our mouths shut, hoping to keep what remains of our voice for another day, getting another good day out of the relationship. But ultimately, these good days are a trick of the eye that leave us believing that the relationship is healthy when it's not. Putting the onus on the survivors to become psychological hostages who hope for a decent day in the imprisonment that is one of these toxic relationships. When we do this for long enough, we slowly lose our authentic selves. We can shift into a reality then that is completely not ours. So you're thinking, hey, Dr. Ramani, you know better. I can't leave. I'm not getting divorced. I'm not dumping my parents. I'm not quitting my job. I got you. I hear you. If you are going to do this dance, this sort of Twilight Zone, I want to keep my own mouth appeasing, as it were, don't trick yourself that these good days are actually good days, because they're not. Recognize that you are always in survival mode, doing what you need in this relationship to keep the trains running on time. Not that it's good, but keeping it on time. And it becomes critical that you cultivate other spaces in your life where you can be you. Friendships, whatever healthy family members you may have, workplace, therapy, support group, community group, whatever or wherever that may be for you. Sometimes it only takes one. Don't buy into the mirage. It was good today, so it's a good relationship. Rather, you've got to see it as, I'm doing this to keep this ship afloat, and I see clearly how toxic these dynamics are. Because that is what survival is about. Not just unseeingly going along and sacrificing yourself on the altar of the toxic relationship, but rather seeing these relationships for what they are, their limitations and all, and recognize that even though they feel like a Faustian bargain, you don't need to sell your soul if you're only willing to see them clearly. And frankly, once you see them clearly, it's like a pair of scissors on the trauma bond. Who knows how much longer you'll last? Giving in, or capitulating, if you will, in a narcissistic relationship is, in its simplest form, it's a survival behavior. Most of us would like to think that we do stand up for ourselves, that we will stand up for ourselves, fight for what is right. I mean, you do when you can, but how many hours do you really have in a day? If you do not give in to those narcissistic folks, you may not just lose a few minutes to an argument. You may lose hours, days, or even weeks to not only the arguing, but then the silent treatment, and then the lashing out, and then the replaying of it, and the rage, and the punishing you, and the tantrum. So over time, if you're in one of these relationships long enough, you do the math and you figure it out. You may say, if I give in on this, I will be able to salvage the afternoon, or the weekend, or the next few months. Time is valuable. So it may very well be that agreeing with them and going along with them that something is your fault, or that they were right, or that yes, they're the ones that remembered it right and you didn't, even when you know that's not true, or you'll do the plan the way they want, even though it's a dumb way to do it, whatever it is, you give in. And they feel a sense of control or dominance or whatever it is they need, and you get your day back. It's a damned if you do situation. Again, if you chose to have the fight with them and push back and not give in and hold your position and your and reality and perception, it could have devolved into something that would last a while. And longer term abuse, as well as rumination on your side about, shoot, I have now given up hours to this, and there are things I didn't get done, or it made me late to work, or I had to get someone to pick up the kids, or it disrupted my sleep. It can mess up your day. But in the same breath, the problem is if you do give in, it feels awful. The narcissistic person gets to continue through the world believing that they are right. You feel like you are complicit in your own gaslighting and abuse. And it can sustain a really unhealthy precedent in the relationship. And you may ruminate about giving in for even longer than you might have ruminated had you had the argument. So it's all about choices here. Now, if you are going to stay in a narcissistic relationship, and a lot of folks do, even if you stay with radical acceptance, the workarounds are painful. We cannot spend every day fighting and proving our reality and making things fair and just with someone who really isn't listening to us. And the giving in is often a primary workaround, but it doesn't have to be all awful all the time. Number one thing you have to do is you have to choose your battles. There are times you may take the fight. Yeah, and a lot of this I know relates to the concept of true north. There may be things they say or do, people that they go after that simply feel unacceptable. So you take the fight and recognize that the opportunity cost is that you lose the afternoon or the day or even the week. These, frankly, become tactical decisions where you figure out where it is worth it. And it may also be things where you believe that you have already lost enough of yourself in the relationship. So you just take back some territory and are willing to lose the time. But this really is, in some ways, it's like you're in a store deciding how much money I'm going to spend. This is about spending time. And then you ask yourself, can I, won't I, and what would it mean to me? And second thing to keep in mind is be prepared. People are sometimes surprised at how much time they lose when they engage with a narcissistic person. It's something I once called the narcissism tax, the expense of lost time and other resources, including money, raised by these relationships. So when you can, and you sense it is coming, already mentally prepare for the loss of time and other resources, whether that means getting a friend to pick up the kids, delaying the meeting, or recognizing that you will need to work a little bit more now that evening or weekend to make up for the time. You may say, you know what? Fighting for what mattered was worth it, and I was ready and I had the supports in place. But on the other, you may be prepared and say, I don't have these supports in place. I cannot give up this time. I am not taking this argument. Remind yourself that when you give in, why you gave in. As I said, it may be tactical, and seeing it as tactical can feel very different than feeling like a doormat or someone who just gives in. The narcissistic person does not care about your reality, so just because you relent doesn't mean you believe what you said to them. It can actually feel quite powerful to recognize how easily you can appease them. By throwing them crumbs, it helps you take back the power. Turn around that breadcrumbing table, right? And you can remain clear on who you are. It feels gross to be in such an inauthentic relationship, but that's old news. It has always been that. And sometimes becoming aware of it can, yes, it can bring up grief, but there's also an empowerment that comes from seeing something as it really is. Another thing you have to do is take care of you. Whether you give in or take the fight, either way, it takes a toll on you, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Whatever it is you need to do, take a walk, call a friend, take a nap, or simply physically soothe yourself in the moment, draw your arms around you, connect with your body. Your body does react to these situations. And being aware of it means that you are less surprised and it takes less of a toll. Stop talking to yourself in a disparaging way. That's the narcissistic person's job. When you give in the name of survival, it's sometimes simply just what needs to happen. But that doesn't mean you're a complicit or a codependent or weak. It means you're trying to survive. The key is that you recognize that giving in is not believing what they are saying. It's not giving up on yourself. It's keeping the trains in your life running on time. And in a world where most people still embolden and enable the narcissistic person, it is easy to believe that they didn't do anything wrong and you're the one with the issue. Trust me, it's not you. You are trying to keep life moving, and getting into a gaslighted house of mirrors with them is not a good use of your time. If anything, your ability to just give them the false narrative that they need to get through their distorted day and still retain your sense of self, that reflects some of the most difficult psychological work a person in an abusive, narcissistic, manipulative relationship has to go through. Lots of people give in these relationships. Again, it's the only way to survive. But without retaining their sense of self, that's what takes a toll on you. But if you can hold on to you in all of this, it will protect you. But ultimately, giving in, as often as we often have to give in to survive in these relationships, doesn't feel good. Because it's that slap in the face, that one more reminder that this is not going to change. And that brings up more grief, as well as bringing up exhaustion and fostering more rumination. Any of us who have active narcissistic relationships in our lives have to give in. Otherwise, our lives would largely be devoted, full-time job, to sparring and trying to convince the narcissistic person of something they will never be able to hear. And that really seems like a waste of time and a life. So find that way, hard as it may be, to recognize this as the workaround it is and hold on to your sense of self, despite the grief it brings. I have to tell you, as a clinician working in this space, this is where I hit the wall with people. They'll say, this is gross, that this is my life, like this entire marriage is a lie. And the gentle reminder to make as they go through the grief and the feelings is, it kind of always was. And sometimes knowing the lie for what it is. A scam doesn't suck less because you know it's a scam, but in a way you're prepared differently for it. So this is hard work. One video ain't going to change it, but I do know that so many of you feel icky after giving in. And I want to humanize that and say that's a normal reaction, but also find those workarounds because the giving in is survival. And sometimes having to do that protects other people, protects yourself, and above all else, protects the other experiences in your life so you can get to them and not waste as much time on this relationship. Have you ever encountered this? Have you ever said, like, God, all I told them was good news and they blew up on me? Why? Because one of the things you should not be saying to a narcissist is good news. You're like, say what? Yeah, good news. And this could be any kind of good news. I got a promotion. I got a raise. I got an award. I won a prize. My friends are taking me away for a special weekend. My birthday is next week. Any kind of good news. And you think, what could go wrong? This isn't criticism. This isn't feedback. This isn't even about them. Why can't I share good news? Because in a narcissistic person, it activates that inadequacy, insecurity, jealousy, and envy that are all massive triggers and bringers of shame in narcissistic people. This pattern of getting raged at or getting passive-aggressive stuff or the silent treatment or contempt for just telling them something good is actually what really confuses people in these relationships. For some of you, this was a pattern that was manifested even in childhood, when a narcissistic, neglectful, or egocentric parent would not take notice of your good news. They would minimize it or not listen to it or contemptuously dismiss it. Say things to you like, okay, big shot, and okay, let's just go see if you could win that again. Maybe that was just a lucky one-time thing. Or they might say to you, ugh, come on, these awards, whatever this nonsense is, it only matters if you can make some money at it. Or doesn't every kid in your school get a trophy these days? These are the same parents that in childhood and then in adulthood, people often feel compelled to please over and over again. But no matter what you do or how you are recognized, they don't care. And that's not because you aren't enough. You are. It's because the people who are narcissistic are empty and egocentric, in this case, your parents. A narcissistic parent is unable to understand that everything isn't about them, and that your award was a moment of joy for you, and that a parent is supposed to be unconditionally about their kids. And even if you are 45 years old, you'll see, you're still getting awards and accolades, those parents won't care any more than they cared about that award you got when you were 5 years old. Sadly, this pattern can then trail people into adulthood when they have narcissistic partners, friends, or workplaces. Same drill. Let's say then you tell your narcissistic partner something great that happened to you, or just something good that happened to you. And you'll see your narcissistic partner will either get grumpy or passive-aggressive or find a way, quietly or loudly, to punish you. And what's so tragic about that is that you are happy and proud of your good news, and you tell whom you believe should be the first person who would want to know. And maybe at some deep level you think, oh, I'm going to tell my partner like this. Other people think I'm great, so this will finally get their attention and validation. No, there's no magic way to get the narcissist to notice you. Rather, your good news ends up activating their inadequacy and their shame, and takes all of the wind out of your sails. And as I said, it sort of spoils the good news for you. After your partner's contempt and tantrum, you may not feel compelled to share your good news with anybody else. And that's sort of sad, right? One thing that can often happen with narcissistic people when you share good news with them is that they'll meet it or respond to your good news with a cruel minimizing and mocking contempt. For example, you might say, hey, I got an award at work, and they give it out only one time a year, and there's going to be an award ceremony in a few weeks. The narcissistic person will respond with stuff like, ugh, that ceremony's when there's traffic. That's really inconvenient. Or, wow, all this award stuff matters to you. Why do you need to be the center of attention? Oh, God, your whole life is, look at me. Everyone celebrate me. And then you expect me to sit in traffic and then eat some rubber chicken dinner so you can get some plaque worth $10? Honestly, when you really, finally, actually really make it in a real job, maybe you won't need all that attention. Maybe you need all these plaques. And then you may give them the date. Maybe you're foolish enough to give them the date of the event, and then they'll either cancel at the last minute or tell you that they can't make it, or they'll come and maybe be grumpy the whole time. But you getting all the attention for a whole evening, that's just too much for them to bear. And your heart will break because that's that. You're proud because you know those things aren't true about you. You're proud. You did good work. It got recognized. But with those words, the entire experience can get cheapened, especially if you don't fully understand narcissism. But at this point, you better. They may not be that obvious, though, in their contempt. I'm giving you sort of a dramatic example. They may do more of a subtle passive-aggressive approach. You tell them about the award, and then you get back, okay, great. So on top of my existing bad day, now I have to hear how great your day is. Listen, I can't be bothered with going out to dinner tonight and celebrate. I have a deadline. Or you might get like a, whoop-de-doo, I can't get a break, can I? And then they will stay on that sad sack victimized rant for a while. And that's going to have the same effect on you as them directly insulting you. And despite your pride and happiness about your award, you may hold back and just stop talking about it. Then it may extend to you not wanting to share the news with anyone anymore because it felt so bad to share it with this one person. A piece of advice I have given to people for many years, and that appears repeatedly in my books and seminars, is when you get a piece of good news in your life, you need to tell everyone who has your back, all the good people in your life first. Your good friends, any family members you have that may be good and kind, anyone who will be happy for you. Start there. Drink up their joy and happiness and celebration and be happy with them. And then, at some point, after you've had that experience, if you have to tell, you tell the narcissist or not. I actually remember having an experience of this in the last year or two. I had developed and done something kind of neat, and I'd gotten some really great feedback on it. And I was in the presence of an invalidating person in my life. But then a really sweet, kind person in my life, this a third party in this conversation, was an old friend and heard about my new thing and said, "Hey, I want to see pictures of this new thing. I'm so excited." And she'd heard about it from someone else. So I pulled out my phone and I shared the picture, and the really sweet, kind friend got so excited. She's like, "Oh my gosh, this is so wonderful, Ramani. I'm so proud of you." She gave me a big hug. It was very sweet. And it felt so nice because this person is so kind, so genuine, and I was actually proud of it. What was very interesting was the invalidating person in my life, who's actually pretty close to me, said, "Why didn't you tell me about this? Why didn't you show me?" The invalidating person was actually getting a little defensive as to why they had not been included ahead of time. Why didn't they know about this? Why are they just finding about it now? And I didn't tell that invalidating person originally because I knew they would have said something snarky or minimized it, and that would have hurt me, so there was no point. I just shrugged and I said, I didn't think it was that big a deal. But interestingly, the invalidating person then became sulky for the rest of the night. No doubt that sense of shame they were then feeling about not being in the know. You can't win with a narcissist, but I felt better because I was unsure about this new thing I had done. And I knew that the narcissist would have not been encouraging. And it really felt good to have that really sweet friend be so happy. I knew the narcissistic person was going to get sulky either way, and this way I protected myself, and I didn't have to go through the hurtful experience of their indifference. It was ironic they happened to be at the situation where this other person was. Had they not, they never would have found out. Sharing good news is a very easy trap to fall into with narcissists. Sometimes you can't get around it. Your good news may become public, and so they may learn it. And then they may get angry that they learned it off of social media or some other public source and not from you directly. If that happens, you could play with it a little bit and say, I didn't think it was that big a deal. I don't want to talk about these things that happened to me. But keep in mind that's not going to work if it's you sharing it on social media. The narcissistic people often almost feel angry that they don't get to be the ones to hear it first because they feel entitled to everything in your life and then comment on it. Their entitlement is such that they feel entitled to knowing everything and trashing it or accepting it as they see fit. It's an interesting form of baiting. However, that anger that you're ultimately going to get from them anyhow is maybe worth it to get positive feedback from healthy people before the narcissist rains on your parade, because the narcissist always rains on your parade. Shame activation is such a universal experience for narcissistic people, and everything seems to bring it up, both the good news and bad news. So I would say this: think twice before you ask them to be the one to accompany you to any event where you are the focus, whether that's a birthday party, an awards ceremony, or other fete or party or something where people will be honoring you in some way. Or at a minimum, may I suggest, take 2 cars. I have seen this happen so many times. The healthy person is, being honored or celebrated. The narcissist goes along and will either drink too much or claim to be sick or exhausted or have a headache or be bored or just get sullen and sulky in the corner, and you will feel compelled to get them out of there or leave with them. and there will be only one car. Think ahead and recognize that I can almost guarantee that they will ruin your night. Ideally, they don't come in the first place, but if that is unavoidable, always make sure you have a plan B in place. Sometimes the only way to get ahead of this is the workarounds. Your good news is their shame activator. So make sure you share it with those who are worthy and make it an afterthought for the narcissistic people in your life. You will not be sorry you do this. Stop like a little child running to the narcissist with the good news, thinking this is what's going to win them over. It's not. They're probably going to get angry, and you lose that precious opportunity to just be with something good. Be with it good first. And just like my experience, where the invalidating person's like, oh, why didn't I know about this? You can then play it off, but have those moments of joy first. So much joy gets robbed from these relationships in the first place. You do need to be strategic in how you present stuff to them and recognize you can't forever be in that role of the 6-year-old child who's waiting for a mother or a father to praise their drawing. If it didn't happen then, it ain't going to happen now. And if you have a narcissistic adult in your life, it's going to be exactly the same thing. They do not like watching anybody else's parade. Remember that. Have you ever felt like, I don't like who I am when I'm with the narcissist? Like, I like the person I am with them, but not them? Ever had that feeling? Drop it in the comments. As you can imagine, it's a pretty common experience, but I want to break it down because this sense of not liking who you are when you are with the narcissist is actually something that really can take a toll above and beyond the narcissistic relationship on a person. Narcissistic abuse has a cascade of patterns associated with it: anxiety, self blame, confusion, self doubt. You already know the list. But for many people, they also have another issue within these relationships. They don't like who they are when they are with the narcissist. Lots, not all, but lots of people who find themselves stuck in long-term narcissistic relationships are often very empathic, right? It's why they didn't kick the narcissist to the curb a long time ago. They try to see both sides. They give the narcissistic person too many second chances, too much benefit of the doubt, too much justification. Many people in narcissistically abusive relationships are nice people in terrible situations. As a result, many of you may struggle when you aren't those things. Narcissistic abuse is theft. It steals so much from us. It steals hope. It steals identity. It steals aspirations. It steals joy. It steals safety. It steals happiness. And in some ways, it steals our empathy. These relationships really result in empathy fatigue. We provide it, but we don't get any of it back from them. And empathy is in some ways a bi-directional system. Some does need to come back in, or we empty ourselves out. So if you are trapped in a long-term narcissistically abusive situation, it's not that your empathy goes away, but it just gets harder to put it out there because you kind of scrape at the bottom of the well. You become numb. So we find ourselves at our worst in these relationships. We are already struggling. And the cruelty of narcissistic abuse is that while we are struggling, on top of that, we view ourselves as being rotten people. Many people in narcissistic relationships find that they are thinking mean thoughts, and that's not their norm to think those mean thoughts, ranging from wishing that the narcissist was dead, or that their narcissist business deal falls apart, or hoping that the person that they are betraying you with cheats on them as well, or feeling a sense of happy when something bad happens to the narcissist, or being glad when the narcissist's flight gets canceled coming home So then you don't have to deal with them for another day. We think these thoughts, right? And they're not nice. We might also notice that we'll recognize that we're happy when the narcissist calls out sick from work or is working late so they won't bother us for dinner. These thoughts, these feelings, they are at odds with the thoughts and feelings of people who traditionally think of themselves as nice people and who actually usually are nice people. Folks in these situations will feel almost this internal sense of betrayal that they're bad people for even thinking such bad thoughts about someone they're in a relationship with. It can all be very disjointed. Many people in relationships with narcissistic people remain really nice people around other nice people. They are nice to the people in the grocery store. They're nice with their good friends. They're nice with nice coworkers or with nice people in their community. But when the narcissistic person is around or evoked, they find themselves dark hearted. We all find ourselves dark hearted, cold, and cut off. There's a disjointed quality to this that can feel unsettling for a nice person who values being kind and nice. And then all of a sudden feeling numb and cold when the narcissist is around. It is not a good feeling. So think about it. What is a major strategy I talk about for managing a narcissist? Grayrock, right? A lot of people managing narcissistic folks, they hate Grayrocking because they feel like it's mean, that it makes them a sort of a mean person, that by being disengaged, that in a way that they're almost being mean or cold or unkind, as though taking the narcissist bait is the kind thing to do because it soothes the narcissist. So after Grayrocking, while the strategy may work in the short term, it means that if you gray rock, you don't give the narcissist the satisfaction that you're of taking the bait or your emotion or giving them your emotion, or you don't fall for the same old tricks and defend yourself, or you just stick to the superficial topics, right? It's a good strategy, but it doesn't feel nice. And after gray rocking, people don't feel like they're being nice people. And your identity is that as a nice person, that disconnect doesn't feel good. I'm a nice person, but I'm actually really being kind of cold and cut off with this person, even though it's for a good reason. Another issue is the victim bully complex. Narcissists bully and bully and bully. You might hit the wall and not be able to take it anymore. And then you say something like, "Why are you so mean?" Or maybe you go all in and say, "You know what? Everybody around here hates you. You are a bully and all of us hate you." And then boom, as I've talked about in other videos, and they do this better than anyone, they turn into a victim, petulant and sad and woe is me. And you feel bad. You feel bad that you said something so mean to someone. And now they look actually really pitiful, right? Your fawn response or your need to rescue may turn on, and you may really struggle and quickly try to appease them. And if they keep playing the victim, then once again, the person experiencing the narcissistic abuse feels guilty for saying such a mean thing that hurt the narcissistic person. The daily thoughts that populate the brain of someone who is forced into or remains in proximity to a narcissistic person tend to be a little dark. What would you might think like, what would my life be like without them? I know it would be so much better without them. I wish they didn't exist. You might think something like, oh, imagine if there was an accident and they weren't here. And you feel bad for thinking that. People who are stuck in narcissistic relationships aren't murderous or dangerous, but they may also find themselves envying the lives of other people that aren't riddled with narcissists. They may envy people who are in happy marriages, or envy people who have partners that do not cheat, or envy people who have partners who cherish them, envy people who have nice parents, or people who have collaborative and friendly workplaces. And that envy doesn't feel good. You want to be happy for other people, But narcissism and narcissistic abuse steal so much of our happiness, put so much stress into our world, fills us with regret. It's exhausting trying to avoid the passive aggressive barbs and the victimized blather and the rage and the bait that you just get exhausted and in some cases disgusted and can sometimes find it hard to be happy for other people. You rally, but inside you feel sort of worn out, and that doesn't feel good when you are someone who prides yourself on empathy, on kindness, and being there for others in an emotionally rich way. Most of us don't like who we are when we are with the narcissistic person. When we are with narcissistic folks, we feel like we are always angry or depressed or anxious or withdrawn or empty or physically ill or resentful or hopeless. It doesn't feel good. And when we are sitting in these negative mood states, we don't like ourselves. We can see the difference when we aren't with the narcissist. We're better. But the more we are with the narcissistic person, the more the echoes of what they do to us trickles into our lives and leaves us feeling pulled out of the other parts of our lives. This is real. The theft of our joy is real. The theft of our soul is real. When we are with someone toxic, it affects us. It's that simple. You aren't bad, but trying to survive while spending time with them really takes a toll on us and can sometimes leave us thinking things that we don't like to think. Again, we're not bad people. We don't want to harm anybody, but we have these thoughts and then think, gosh, I'm like this with them. I feel like I'm a bad person. And for some people, there's a fear that if I'm like this enough, I'm going to always be this dark hearted person who envies happy people. And that doesn't feel good. For some folks, therapy becomes a really important tool to push back on that. Just having a safe place to vent these kinds of bad, uncomfortable feelings and then put them out there and hopefully get them validated. Thanks again.